This is 2.3, the American Revolution. The objective for today is for students to evaluate the causes of the American victory during the Revolutionary War. You're going to do this by taking the notes in this lesson and then completing a handout or an assignment. In this video, there's a lot of pictures and images with text added to it. You need to write down all of the text. So it's not a standard bullet point PowerPoint. This one has a lot of pictures and images in it, but you still need to write down all of the text. The text is important. So at the very beginning of the Revolutionary War, the British had a very clear advantage. If you take a look at the images over to the right, the military strengths and weaknesses, you do not need to write those down in the chart. Those are just to give you an idea of a little bit more information about what the United States had as far as strengths and weaknesses and what Great Britain had as far as strengths and weaknesses. I want you to focus on what I have here over on the left-hand side. So the British had an advantage for a couple of reasons. First, they had a larger army and navy. Second, they had a lot more money. Third, they had the ability to manufacture war supplies, so they could make guns and weapons that we could not or did not have the ability to make. However, the Americans had their own set of advantages when the Revolutionary War began. First, they were familiar with the land, so they understood what the land was like, how to maneuver, how to best get around, how to best to deliver supplies. They also really wanted to win. They were motivated, they were fighting for themselves, they really, really wanted to win. Third, they were fighting defense. Right? For anybody who ever plays sports, it's easier to defend than it is to necessarily score sometimes. And so they only had to play defense. They didn't have to score any land. They didn't have to score anything. If they just protected what they had, then that's all they needed to do. And finally, there was a lack of British support back home. So people in Great Britain really didn't care about the colonies. They didn't understand why we were fighting this war. They didn't support it. They didn't want to spend money on it. So for them, they didn't have any reason to want to win this war. So Britain underestimated the colonial commitment to independence. Britain really didn't think that the colonies really wanted independence as much as they did, so they completely underestimated their abilities. And in order for the English to win, the English had to find and defeat the Continental Army. So they didn't just have to fight battles, they actually had to find them and defeat them. Some differences between the two. So on the left here, we have General George Washington for the United States or for the Colonial Army. And on the right, we have General Gage. Some important things to know is, again, our goal was to outlast the British. Under General Washington, he was known as a strong leader who had a strong focus on protecting his men and supplies. He understood that we didn't have very many supplies, wanted to protect his men as best as possible, so that was really his main focus. In addition to that, the Americans also understood they had to make an alliance, and they had to make that alliance with France if they were going to win this war. The British military strategies was to do what they called divide and conquer. They used the loyalists, and you haven't really talked about loyalists yet, but loyalists were people or individuals who were loyal to Great Britain. So they would use the loyalists and they would try to seize property from the colonists. They also used blockades. So blockades are where you take ships and you block the ports so that boats could not get in or out. This was a problem because the colonists needed to trade to get money. They also did not have the ability to make their own military supplies, so they needed a way to get military supplies in and out. And if the British ships were blocking the ports, it was very difficult to do that. Again, as long as Britain did not defeat the Continental Army, England could not win. So we were playing defense. We did not have to worry about winning the war. We just had to not let Britain win. There are 3 important battles that you are going to need to know about the Revolutionary War. 3 important battles. So if you want to write your notebook 1, 2, 3, the first of those important battles is going to be the Battle of Lexington and Concord. Battle of Lexington and Concord was in 1776. It was known as the first battle of the Revolutionary War. Most of the battles in the Revolutionary War from 1776 to 1777, the American colonies did not win. British won the majority of those battles. So at the end of 1777, if you had to ask who was winning, you'd probably say Great Britain. And if you look at the chart on the right-hand side there, you will see in 1776 and 1777, British was able to seize, meaning they were able to control New York City and Philadelphia. If you remember back from when we were talking about our colonies, Philadelphia and New York City both had large seaports. So both of those areas were big trade areas. So if British had control over the United States, that meant it was difficult for the United States or for the colonies to trade. From the very beginning of the war, Benjamin Franklin tried to form an alliance with France. So we knew that we needed support from someone else. We knew that France did not get along with Great Britain, hence the French and Indian War, if you remember that from just the other day. So their focus was, how can we align ourselves or get support from France? Finally, the French agreed to join America after the Battle of Saratoga, which took place in 1777. So I said there are 3 battles you need to know. The first battle was Lexington and Concord. The second battle is the Battle of Saratoga. The Battle of Saratoga was a turning point. After losing the majority of the battles in 1776 and 1777, we finally won the battle in 1777, the Battle of Saratoga, which allowed the French to join us. This battle was known as the turning point of the Revolution. Part of what made this happen was this young man here on the left-hand side, Lafayette. Lafayette Square, if you've ever been to Lafayette Square in D.C., that is this man right here. He was responsible for he was a Frenchman, and he was responsible for persuading the French to join the Americans in the Revolutionary War. However, not long after winning the Battle of Saratoga, we ended up fighting Valley Forge in 1777 and 1778. Our troops nearly starved to death. However, Washington and Lafayette, underneath their strong leadership abilities, were able to inspire and train the troops to continue to fight, which led us to the final battle, which was the Battle of Yorktown. In 1781, Washington was able to trap the British troops, the British General Cornwallis, between the Continental Army and the French Navy. So if you take a look at this, this happened on the Chesapeake Bay at the Battle of Yorktown. You can see in red where the colonial troops were with General Washington. You can see how they were able to surround the blue troops. And eventually what else ended up happening was the French army ended up blockading over here so that the British troops could not escape. This is just another vision of the Battle of Yorktown. You can see the British right here in the red. You can see right here we've got the ships out in the harbor. And you can see the French lines and the American lines completely surrounding the British at the Battle of Yorktown. Another image just to give it to you. These would be the American troops in the blue, the French troops in the white, and the British were right here and completely surrounded. So in 1781, General Cornwallis finally surrendered to Washington, which finally ended the American Revolution. Cornwallis' surrender is known as the day the world turned upside down.